Hello, my name is Hamlet Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast celebrating the personal histories, the intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who help shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic Crosstown Concourse in beautiful Midtown Memphis. The website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. Now, we don't have sponsors for this project, but if we did, today's interview, the first of two interviews that I did with Elizabeth Alley, would be brought to you by the amazing Bonnie Beaver. Professor Bonnie Beaver was a teacher at the University of Memphis for many, many years and was just completely different than any of the other teachers who were there at the time. I think about her all the time. Elizabeth and I sort of nerd out on our admiration for Bonnie Beaver in this talk. Now, this interview with Elizabeth was recorded on June 21st, 2025. Enjoy the interview. What's your earliest memory of art?
My earliest memory of art is it would probably just be my house growing up. I lived on the corner of Central and Tanglewood, and my dad worked for the newspaper, and he was an illustrator, cartoonist for the newspaper, for the Commercial Appeal. And so we just had art supplies in my house. We had ebony pencils, kneaded erasers, and things like that. And he also had some artwork of his that was hanging around the house, and also by other family members, because other people in his family were also artists and political cartoonists.
So you grew up and your dad was a cartoonist?
Yes.
Well, it sounds like a dream. Was it?
Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, it was great because sometimes he would work at home, and he always had a drawing table set up at home. So he always had a space to make art. And again, I thought that was normal too. And so he would sometimes work at home, and I could just see him just go at it with like watercolors. He used watercolors and he used pen and ink. And so I got to see that. And then sometimes he would make stuff for us, like for a school thing or something like that occasionally. This was when I was really young, like until I was like 10 maybe. And so that was nice. And then so after we moved away from that house, in the other house, I remember this better in the other house, we always had a stack of newsprint that he would bring home. So there was always paper for me to just do, for all of us to do just whatever we wanted with.
Now, did he have his own office?
No, it was always, so let's see. In that second house that we lived in, it was, he had a drawing table and like just a little, like almost like a cabaret next to it. That would be it was in the living room for a while, and then it moved to this den that he added onto the back of our house. And it was just so it was in the living space.
Yeah, so it was there where you guys could see him work. Would he go into the Commercial Appeal?
Yeah, he worked at night most of the time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Okay. And so that was something that was obviously like encouraged. You guys had these supplies, and then you were saying that you had, or there were some things that other members of your family had made that were around because they were also makers.
Yes.
What kind of things?
Well, let's see. My dad's father, was a political cartoonist at the Commercial Appeal, and so was his father. So I feel like we probably had some of their work, and then we had other political cartoons by my dad's friends that he worked with. So we had one like of Jimmy Carter, and it was as if Jimmy Carter was Washington on the Potomac, and it was said like, "Shall we gather at the river?" or something. And I never understood it, but it was in our hallway the whole time I was growing up. And there was a very detailed drawing of the old newsroom at the old Commercial Appeal that was downtown by another one of my dad's friends. And those are the ones that like come to mind the most.
Yeah. Now, was your dad funny?
Yeah.
I mean, was it? I mean, because in my mind, like I think about like some comics or some cartoonists are really funny on the page, but then in real life they're kind of stoic and like. But your dad was funny all the time.
No, he was pretty funny, and he would do like he did a lot of. It was more like illustrations, although he had a caricature like style. So he would draw like somebody famous or some like a local politician or something. So he wasn't doing political cartoons. He was illustrating, and then kind of like just with assignments. So one particular memory I have is that he drew. He had to draw. Oh, you remember in the commercial appeal, it used to be the weekly TV guide.
Yeah.
He would draw the cover for that most of the time. So, like one time, it was like all these people, and one of the people had to be Bernadette Peters, but he actually drew and he would just draw these. Like he would draw a lot of people like from memory, but he drew like a different famous person, and I like picked up on it because I knew what they both looked like. I think he like was supposed to draw Bernadette Peters, and he drew Marilyn McCoo or something like that.
Wow. I mean, in my mind, I sort of envision your dad sort of over there at the table, and you guys are sort of like messing around and like doing things, but then your dad is over there drawing. And now, is that sort of how it was? He would be there in the house working on things?
Not all the time. No, that was not. I mean, it wasn't all the time because he worked at night, and he would not. I mean, I feel like he probably tried not to bring work home more just because he didn't want to do it, than he didn't want to interrupt family time. And then when I was like, how old would I have been? Maybe 8. He actually put work together for a show because he was really good at watercolors. And that was the only time he ever did that. And whenever it came to like thinking of like drawing his own things, that weren't assignments, he was always kind of stumped. Like he didn't have the studio, like process that I do now, and that everybody I know has. He just kind of when he thought of something, he might do something. But he did have a show, and it was at a gallery on Front Street on the second floor, and I don't know whose gallery it was. I don't know what it was called. But for a few weeks, he just had this like burst of creativity. And it's, like we know how this works. Like the more you make, then the more you make, right? So once he got started, he was just making all kinds of stuff. He even drew like the invitation. And, but that was it. That was the only show he ever had. And that's the only time he did that in like a concentrated way. There were times that he would like find an image that he liked, and then he would like paint that, and then that would be it. Or he would there was a brief time where he was doing, actually it wasn't brief because he was doing trying to do portraits of my mom's brothers and sisters. She has a lot of them, and so it lasted a really long time. But it wasn't like it was because he liked it. It was because it was really hard.
Now, was that one show? Was that something that he talked with you about? Like, was it something where you were like, Dad, what's up? How come you never had a show?
Oh, no. I just observed what was happening. And I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
Like, I really loved it. I loved that night at the opening, and, all of the people he worked with were there, and a bunch of family members, and he sold a bunch of stuff. It's like he would paint particular people so that they would buy the work, and so that worked for him.
That's brilliant. We note to self, start making some paintings of really wealthy Memphians. Right. Now, okay, so that's in the house. What are some other things that are in the house? Sounds like you had tons of materials. P.S. I love how you were talking about the materials that were there, and then the tabaret, because I know that you are a big material / tabaret fan. Oh yeah. And so you've got that, and then you've got the pieces from friends. And P.S. I'm totally like blown away that the things that your dad had up were political cartoons. Like in my brain, like my only reference to like cartoonists is Gene Siegel. And so like when I'm thinking about Gene, I'm thinking about like, you know, she did the News of the Weird pieces, and then but she made these other things, you know, like these beautiful landscapes. And so like in my brain, I was like, oh yeah, it'll be the stuff they do outside of their cartooning. But I love how your dad had these political cartoons hanging up on the wall.
Yeah, and some of his watercolors also, and like and pen and ink drawings and things like that. And if you go to my brother's house, you'll see a few of his pieces hanging up. I have one piece of his hanging up. He did a portrait of my great grandmother, and it was, I mean, it is amazing. And it was for, I don't know, and this was my mom's mother, and it was for, I think it was for their 50th wedding anniversary, which would have been like 77-ish. And so at some point, my grandmother worked with my dad to have prints made. So I have like a print of that hanging up so that my great grandmother is always with me.
Now, what about, and so if I remember right, you have sort of a large family. How many siblings do you have, and where are you in there?
I have 3 brothers and 1 sister, and I am the second oldest.
Okay.
So I have an older brother, younger sister, 2 younger brothers.
Okay. And what about your mom? What did she do?
She was a computer programmer.
Okay.
She retired a few years ago, and she went back to school when I was a kid, and so that was like kind of another like kind of cool thing to see, is her just kind of doing this thing for her and for us. And so she went and got a degree in computer programming, and this was like, what would this have been? Maybe around 1980.
Okay.
So, and she's like working with computers, so I feel like I got like the analytical part of myself definitely from her and from her work with computers.
And then also just like how much problem solving there's got to be involved with working with computers, especially then.
Yeah.
And so you were there, you have these siblings, and what are some other ways visual art or art in general, and by art it could be as broad as, you know, the obvious ones like drawing and things like that, but it could also be things that were crafted or objects that are around the house that you sort of remember, you sort of have in your brain.
My headphones keep sliding off.
Okay, hang on. Maybe could they be backwards?
Are they backwards?
Let me see. I don't think so. Hang on, let me see if I'm going to invade your airspace here. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah. Okay, so when I was little in the early 70s, my mom did all kinds of like crafts, like painting ceramic things, or I think she did macrame, and there's always stuff around the house like that because it was the early 70s. And that's just what you did when you were a young mom with 2 little bitty kids. And she continued to make things, like she went through a cross stitch phase. She made just think like that kind of analytical mind doing a cross stitch. They were just amazing and intricate. She went through a cake decorating phase when I was in high school. And so I loved that because there was always like cake everywhere. And again, just went down like a rabbit hole of it. And that was in the mid 80s. So, you know, it wouldn't have been like looking at YouTube. Like she was probably like getting books or something. Yes. And just figuring it out. And throughout my whole life, she crocheted, and she taught me multiple times, and then one time it finally stuck, and then I crochet as well. And she still crochets, but she likes the really super intricate things, like making very intricate patterns. And so it's like she gets started on them, and then it's like it's a lot of work, and so she might not always finish it. She'll think, oh, I just want to do something simple, but then she starts something simple and it just bores her, and she goes back to the complicated thing. But also, there was a lot of crocheting and knitting. My mom's other grandmother crocheted and knitted just so constantly that when she was basically on her deathbed and non-responsive, her hands were still moving like she was knitting. And she made these creepy little dolls that were like doll heads and doll hands, but then the rest of it was crocheted and then it was like crocheted into a blanket for the baby, so that like the doll was a blanket at the same time. And then my mom's mom also always made things. She sewed when I was a kid. She made these intricate smock dresses. She made quilts. She made stuffed animals. She made just all kinds of stuff. And then she went back to work when she was like 50, and but continue. And then she had a brief career as a real estate agent. And then after that, she just started making things again, just quilts, just all kinds of things like that. And then she painted too. She and her sister, actually all of her siblings, they all painted once they retired.
No, I mean, you were talking about all of these people, all of these different influences and different kinds of things that are happening in the house. What about like for you when you were there, when you were a kid? Are there early memories of you making?
Oh yeah, I drew all the time. I can remember like painting with watercolor, like with one of those little watercolor sets when I was really young. We lived in that first house I mentioned until I was 4.5, and so I have a lot of memories from that house of just I would make like I would draw a lot, and then as I got older and like started playing with Barbies, I would make clothes for my Barbies. I would make furniture. I would repurpose things for them. So my whole like playing with Barbies was just basically making things for them and setting things up. And played with Legos a ton. I had a huge Lego set, and I built everything like it was supposed to look. And then I like built just crazy houses. My sister and I used to draw house like floor plans. Like we would just make up like houses, and then we like sit down and explain them to each other. Okay, so this is where I would have this thing because I like, and so I was always like drawing and trying to make things. And I remember going to summer camp once and we painted like some ceramic stuff, like the same like way that my mom did in the early 70s. And I was like, oh, that's my favorite thing ever. And every like new thing like that I came across, I was like, oh, that's my favorite thing ever.
Now, you were saying you were drawing with your sister. What about your other siblings? Were they into art as well?
Yeah, my brother and I would draw together a lot. We would sort of make things in the yard. Like we sort of made like a tree house that was like really just a couple of pieces of wood on a, on a hedge. And but we would sort of like do some things together. And we had, when I was a kid, we had a gravel driveway, and we would sit in the gravel driveway and like sort of make paths for toy cars and things like that.
And so when you were talking about doing the summer camp where you were painting things, were there lots of early education moments for you in terms of the arts? Were there other camps, or was art important in the schools?
We always had art at my school. I went to St. Louis school on Shady Grove. And we always had art, always. And I loved it the most. And then as I got older, I would like draw things for school. We had like sort of a school newspaper, and sometimes I would draw stuff for that. And then as far as camps, they were more like, because my mom worked kind of camps, not like, let's get you better at this thing kind of a camp. But they were, I don't know if that was really as much of a thing in the 80s. So for several years, once my mom started working, we went to day camp. And again, any kind of art related thing that we did there, I just absolutely loved. And the rest of the time I was bored out of my mind. And then associated with that, there was like a week-long summer camp. And so I always tried to do like arts and crafts when I was there.
Now, you were saying you were making these drawings in school for like the school newspaper, for the yearbook. Was that one of those things where it was a way for you to be connected to those people, or rather, hang on, wait, let's see. How did that work for you? I mean, making these drawings, like for some people, it was kind of like an awesome thing and almost like a way of being accepted or a way of being cool. How were you thinking about it?
Well, I loved doing it. One, I loved doing it. Two, I knew that other people liked it, and I liked the attention. But then a secret third thing is that I always felt a little bit of pressure to be really good at it because my dad was so good at it, and because I naturally took to it. I also felt like I should, and everything I did should be amazing. So put a little pressure on myself.
Now, with your dad, was it one of those things where your dad would be like, oh, this is how you do a nose, or this is how you do eyes, or anything like that?
You know what? He taught me and probably my brother 1-point perspective. So he would draw that out. He would draw like a box, and then he'd draw 4 lines going out, and then he would like populate and that would be the room, and then he would populate the room with like a light and a table and a rug, and that's how I still teach that when I teach sketching. I'm like, here's 1 point for perspective, how I learned it as a child. But no, he was not like a natural teacher. No, he just did his thing, and we watched him, but he wasn't like, here's how you do this.
Okay. Now, what about other ways for art to sort of enter your brain? Were you exposed to museums or magazines or books or comics or album covers?
Comics and album covers. Yeah, somehow like some comics like made their way into our house. Actually, one of the ways was through the Encyclopedia Britannica, because we had a set, or actually it was the New World Encyclopedia. So I probably saw a lot of it. I just probably learned a lot from those about art and about places. And let's see, we had some comics. We did have some album covers, but they were albums that was like Grease and Jaws. Let me think. Museum visits would have just been if we ever had field trips in school. I don't really remember going to any of the local places when I was a kid. I did have that one, gallery experience with my dad. Also going to if we ever went to my dad's friends' houses, they always had art in them because they were all also working at the paper. My dad's mother would take us to see A Christmas Carol. That was kind of the extent of my cultural exposure as a kid. And then once I got older, my teen years, I probably had more exposure to it because I made it because I could get there somehow, myself.
Okay. Now, was it one of those things where it was more intense or more intentional for you to go to these things because you became more interested in it? Or was it one of those things where you had the means, you had the ability to go to the museums and go to the galleries and see the things?
It was because I was interested in it.
What do you think it was that made you interested in it in a way where you would be like, I'm going to go and do these things now that I have a car?
Well, it wasn't so much of that. It was kind of because I had a friend who was also, really into art when we were in high school, and so I was able to get places with her. So, but it's not like she was dragging me along. I wanted to do it, and it was probably my idea. Sometimes so when I was 15. My family moved from here to Panama City. So this was in Panama City. So we had like a little art center. It was cute. And but also I went with her because for a while her dad was working in South Florida, so I would go down there with her and her mom, and then we would go to like the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, and then also the Dali Museum. We went there, and those both those experiences had a huge impact on me. Just seeing that in person, and but also like being with somebody who also appreciated it was a lot of fun. And so I mean, probably like it started to develop my love for going to museums. And then
because that Ringling collection is super famous. I mean, it's supposed to be just an amazing collection. What are some things you remember from visiting the Ringling?
They had an El Greco, or at least one El Greco, and that was one that my friend, her name's Robin, she and I were both just obsessed with, and we still have this thing about traveling around in an Airstream trailer with an El Greco strapped to the top of it. So I remember that, and that's probably my biggest memory of Ringling. And then at
hang on. Yeah. Let's pretend that I don't know anything about El Greco. What is it about El Greco, that particular El Greco, or El Grecos in general, that you're into? What is it about that lights you up?
Well, when I was, a teenager, they just seemed like crazy. Like they were all like, the figures are so like melty. And also these were huge, huge paintings. And, therefore you would have to, if you were in an Airstream, you would have to strap it to the top because they were so big. So just seeing something like of that scale and also that age, like how, just how old it is and how like funky it was for how old it was. I think all of that just filled my cup.
And so, I'm sorry, you were about to say something about the Dali Museum. Or you were going to say something about something other than the Ringling. I'm sorry.
The Dali Museum. I mean, it was just like it was all Dali, and it was like spectacular and just weird. And I just like, I mean, anything weird at that time, I was like, more of that, please. But also, like as I'm saying all this, I am remembering that my grandmother. I probably went to a lot of museums with my grandmother, my mom's mother. Because she just liked it. She was just cool like that and would just take us. And maybe I didn't appreciate it as much as a kid, but they moved to right outside of Chicago. When I was about 6, probably. That's when she started her career as a real estate agent. And so we would, my brother and I, and then later my sister, would go and spend most of the summer, or a month or something with them. For a few years, and she would always make sure to take us to cultural things, and sometimes we would go to downtown Chicago, and that was that was the coolest thing to me when I was a kid. Just the big city, like a McDonald's in a big building, that's all I wanted as a kid. I thought that was the coolest thing. But we would take the train there, and then we would go to museums. I don't remember if we went to the Art Institute. That might have just been with a bunch of kids, might have just not been the thing to do. But there's another museum in Chicago that I can't think of that we would go to.
There's the Field Museum.
Oh, the Field Museum. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So we went there a lot. I don't really remember it all that much.
I mean, it's one of those museums, when you go with kids, there's a gabillion things, and you can stay there forever. And okay, so you were doing those things with your grandmother, and then what was it that made you guys move to Sarasota? Was it work?
It was Panama City, and it was because my stepdad started a limousine service in Panama City. And it was just a thing that he wanted to do that he couldn't do in Memphis, and his parents had moved to Panama City. And so we moved to Panama City. It was, so my brother stayed here to finish his last year of high school. So it was me and my sister, and then by then we had little John, who was, not little John, just little brother, John, who was probably, he was 1. He was very young. And so it was like kind of a different iteration of our family. So for for the longest time I had been the middle child, and then we moved there and I was the oldest for a little while because it was just me and Catherine and John. And and then my brother lived with us for a little while too, my older brother.
And so you were down there, and this was during high school.
Yes.
So you moved down when you were like
15.
The worst time to move. So you were down there, and what about in Florida? What was the art like in terms of the school system down there?
Well, it was, it's really interesting because here in Memphis, I went to Kirby, and they had like one good art teacher, and I can't remember her name, although she was a little bit crazy. It was not Mary Kay Van Giesen. She had stopped teaching at Kirby by the time that I got there. But it was also taught by like a coach. And that year, and he just, like, I'm sure he was a fine coach, but he just didn't bring any passion to teaching art. It was really just checking boxes. And that year I actually made a D in art 6 weeks because I was just so not interested in that, like that guy and what he was teaching, how he was teaching. And then the next year, in my sophomore year, I had the whoever the better teacher was. And then we moved. But at my new school in Panama City, Bay High School, go Tornadoes, we had a whole lot of art teachers. We had 3, actually. And they taught things like ceramics, some kind of like weaving or fiber arts. And then, so that was one teacher, and I'm sorry that I can't remember her name. But those classes were so fun because we would just sit at a table. We had a bunch of tables where we had like 4 to 6 people, and we would just sit, and we would just listen to music, and we just make our things. And then we had another art teacher, Cynthia Smith, who was amazing, and she's taught like drawing and all kinds of things. And I ended up doing like basically taking like independent study because I just kind of needed to use up some extracurricular time, and I didn't want to do like a study hall or anything like that. So I do kind of an independent study. And then there was a third art teacher, and also I can't remember his name, but we called him Neil Sadaka anyway. So I don't know if I would remember. That I never had him as a teacher, but like there was like that many teachers there, so that was kind of great, really.
Now, were you being exposed to different kinds of different artists from like outside of the norm? Is the teacher showing you things? Mm-hmm. Are you being exposed to art history in any way?
A little bit, yes, but here's the like kind of where my interest in I guess contemporary or recent history art, New York City comes from. I worked at a dry cleaners, and I worked for this woman who was a terrible boss, but she did leave all of her old magazines at the dry cleaners, and they were like this. She was the owner; she didn't work there, and it was like New York Magazine. Or like what's another like magazine that would have had art stuff in it, like Bazaar, or things like that. And so I worked like every night at this dry cleaner, so I would flip through these magazines, and like I remember a whole story on Andy Warhol and Basquiat, and I knew about them, but this was just like way more in depth than I would have gotten anywhere else, because this is like 1987. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I can just go on the internet and look them up. Right. So that was like just like a part of my education as a teenager. It was all about, there's in New York Magazine, it's just all about living in New York. Mm-hmm. And it just like opened up this whole other world to me that was the complete opposite of Panama City in 1987.
Let's see. art.
I was talking about art at my
High
school
school.
in Panama City.
3 teachers.
3 teachers, art club. We had an art club.
What was art club like?
We sometimes Cynthia Smith would bring in people and to show us things like enamel, painting enamel on metal. You know, like little pins
Yeah, the
and
cloisonné.
things. Yeah, yeah. And that was amazing. And I was like, oh, that's a thing I'm going to start doing. But I mean, I didn't. And we did field trips. So we must have gone to that art center, but there was also like some cool little spots where it'd be like a frame shop, but then there's also like all this cool old art in it, and you just kind of like flip through like some stacks, and I remember that. We did we decorated like some doors, and we painted flats for backgrounds for like proms and dances.
Now, you were talking about your friend Robin from before. Were there other people in the cohort or in the group of art kids at that high school that were
Yes.
important?
Yes, yes. I mean, we had just a whole group of little weirdos, and Robin was like the queen bee, and there were some other folks who were, just taking a lot of art classes. I mean, that's mostly where we met each other, and then we would end up hanging out. Sometimes we would gather like in the library, like in front of the library in the morning, and just do weird things. Like we, like start dancing or just like sit down and pretend like we were meditating or something. And actually one of the people in our little weirdo group was Dr. Bill McEwen, who's now at the University of Memphis teaching art history.
Whoa, what a strange little Venn diagram overlap.
Yes.
Now, he's on the list of people to have come in sometime
Wonderful.
soon. Now, what was Bill like as a teenager?
Very much like Bill is as an adult. And he has twin sisters, so she was also sort of in that group. And there was some of them would do like an exquisite corpse, kind of a writing thing. Sometimes I remember he would do that, and it was like, I mean, I'm sure I did not appreciate it at the time, but it was like really great to have that group in that school where everybody else, like I didn't realize it until recently, but I think everybody else there was stoned at all times, and it was just a weird place. I mean, Panama City is not like it is now. It wasn't like it is now. It was kind of an odd place. The school was downtown Panama City, and that's just something you don't hear about very often, is Panama City having a downtown. But there was this really nice park downtown that when we went out, like we would often go to that park just to like hang out. Like maybe somebody had a guitar or something, and we would just basically just hang out and smoke cigarettes. And I would sketch.
Now, when you were drawing or when you were making things with the crew, like you were talking about doing some of the exquisite corpses, like for me, I know that being around other people while they're making things can be really great, but also to have things like, obviously where they're like touching things and making things in this kind of collaborative way can also be really great. I'm curious, like when you were talking about how you guys would sometimes hang out and make drawings and then sometimes you would sketch, because I know one of the ways I know you or I think about you is this kind of like a social drawer or like a person where drawing is sort of like a kind of a common point or a point of commonality for a lot of the people that you're around. Was that something that was present then?
Yeah, well, I was like I had already started carrying a sketchbook in high school, and like probably when I was still at Kirby. And but I remember sketching when I was at Bay High, and I actually have like my earliest sketchbook is like from 1989, 1990, and I can really credit Cynthia Smith, who like in her classes, I would like I would come up with all these elaborate ideas of things that I wanted to draw or paint, but I just couldn't get it out onto the paper. And she said, well, what you need to do is draw from life. And then you'll like, it'll give you kind of a point of reference of like how to draw a plant or how to draw this or that. And so that's what I did for the rest of my life is to draw from life. I mean, that came from her telling me to do that. So in my sketchbook, it kind of went from like kind of halfway sketches of things that I thought might be cool to draw bigger later or to make in some way, to just like, plants and cars and just like there's one drawing that cracks me up. It's in my house, and it's like a chair and I don't know, something else. And I wrote in my sketchbook a lot too. Like I noticed when I was like the last time I looked through it that every single small drawing, because I might do like 5 small drawings on a page because it was like 9 by 12 or 8.5 by 11, like had the date on it. Like every single small drawing had the date on it, even if like everything on the page was from the same day, which makes me laugh. But what makes me laugh even more is this sketch at my house, and I wrote on there, if anybody is looking at this that doesn't know me, just know that I did not pick out this furniture. I was such a little bitch. But yeah, so I would draw, like I would draw in class. Well, I try to draw in class. I always got in trouble like from early childhood drawing in class. But I still would try to do that. And then I would draw like at lunch. And then if we went to the park, and then I would draw around my house. Sometimes I drew at work. I worked at a deli and, like convenience store / deli. And I would draw there if we were slow. So yeah, I did that. Yeah, all through my teenage years.
Now, I mean, just because it's sitting there in front of us, I'm curious about how, as grown-ups, here we are, we're sort of at a certain age where we are reflective and we sort of think about some things that we've done in the past. You were saying that you were looking at that sketchbook not long ago. Mm-hmm. What are some things that you noticed about the sketchbook aside from this great thing about how you dated every single drawing in there?
And how I criticized my mother's taste.
Right.
It was all in pencil, and it was all very small. Like I used to draw like really, really small. And it was pretty tight too. I was just like try to draw a leaf, I try to draw the leaf, how the leaf looked. And so those are definitely things that I notice that are different now.
What about some of the things that you were choosing? I mean, for me, one of the things I love about looking at sketchbooks and drawings is really you're just basically telling us what you're looking at and what you're paying attention to. Well, I mean, aside from your mom's your mom's furniture choices, what were some other things that you notice about the things that you were choosing to draw?
Well, it was a lot of trees and plants because it was Florida, so there were palm trees, and at lunch I would often sit outside and just draw the trees that were on the campus, and also like this park that we would go to, just trees and plants, and I would pick like one thing, like a bench, at the park, and maybe the things around it. And I tried to draw people too. So I have like a sketch of Robin sitting and playing guitar. And I probably have a couple of those from over the years. And I drew like my sister sometimes. And it was just very like this one thing, like my sister sitting up in bed, Robin playing the guitar, a bench, a chair.
And I love how you were saying that you have it and that you were looking at it not too long ago. I mean, that's something we could talk about later, but since it's just sitting here and laying there, I'm curious about your sketchbooks and how those function for you, how you think about them, because you are a super sketchbook keeper. And so I'm curious, like when you were saying that you found it the other day or you were looking through it the other day, I'm curious, what does that look like for you? Like when does that happen, and how does that work in your life?
Well, my older sketchbooks, so, starting in like 1989 to maybe, well, I have some sketchbooks in my studio. And it's because I reference them sometimes. And then some of them I basically just haven't taken to the other storage space yet, which is upstairs. I have an area where I keep paintings and things. And so I have a great big shelf, couple of big shelves just full of sketchbooks. So what I was looking for, I was actually looking for something in particular that time that I recently looked at it. And when I say recently, it could have been like 2 years ago. But my sister-in-law is Christy Dallas Alley, is a writer, as is my brother. And she was working on something that took place in Memphis in the early 90s. So she was kind of like asking for like, what are the things we did? Where are the places that we went? And so I started looking through my sketchbooks. So that's kind of what they are for me. I mean, it's almost like having a journal, but it's easier to go through because it's all images, or it's mostly images. I used to write a lot in my sketchbooks, and so I just pulled down like that early sketchbook through like 95, 96, just flip through to see what I could find to like jog my memory. And also just specific art stuff that we did at that time. Like there was this thing that Greeley Myatt and Fred Burton did, where it was like a kind of a mock competition between MCA and U of M, because I was at U of M at the time, and so I had like stuff about that in there. And
I think I still have that poster. It's like a Basquiat Warhol poster, except it's Fred and Greeley
in boxing gloves.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Greeley they intentionally made him super extra tiny.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay. All right, let's see. So thinking about the sketchbooks, and you were saying that it was like a kind of a constant thing. And you were talking about this one teacher who was suggesting that you, make drawings from life and you sort of do these things. Was there is there an origin story for the sketchbooks?
Well, I wish there was, but I know that I had one when I was at Kirby. I remember carrying it around. But I don't really know what precipitated that, because that's not something my dad ever did or had, and at that time we didn't live in the same house with him, and so I really don't. I mean, honestly, I don't know where that the decision came from. It just, but it might have been actually because when I was throughout my entire childhood. My siblings and I spent a lot of time at my great-grandparents' house. And the art that they had in their house was like a Renoir like print, and a lot of like religious stuff. And that's it. But they encouraged me to do, like whatever. And so they always had these notepads. I mean, that were basically just, I mean, they were so they could like write down their card game scores, but also they were just for me, and I could just use as much of that paper as I wanted. And I was just constantly, there was a very long period where I was designing clothes on these little pads. So I always had that. And then like there was a period where like, my parents got divorced, so then we weren't living with my dad anymore. So then, like, there weren't all of the art supplies, and also kind of around the same time, my great grandparents moved, And we didn't go over there as much anymore because we were going to school on the other side of town. And so it's like that access to really just paper, just like having things around that I could draw on was not there anymore. And so I must have started, figuring out a way to buy sketchbooks, because I also, now I'm starting to remember, like in 8th grade, sketching in books at home. And so at some point, I had to do, it was either that or don't draw anything unless I'm like at school.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, for me, like I remember my kind of sketchbook when I was a kid was just like that sort of like it was like a horizontal format thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a thing that you could get at Walgreens. I mean, for
Oh
sure.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like a flip up kind of thing. And I think it might have said sketchbook on it or something like that. But for me, it was like more about making these drawings and then tearing the drawings out, like keeping it as an artifact was never anything that was like on my radar. I mean, for some reason, and I don't know why until much later. But I like how you were talking about. I mean, it was almost like you were talking about yourself, like Michael Pollan talks about being a situational omnivore. You're like a situational drawer. Like when you find yourself in a place and it has some paper and it has like the ebony pencils or it has the things, then this is what you do, or you sort of grab it and take it with you as you go. And so you've got this time in high school, and it sounds like all during this time there's huge support for you as a kiddo making these things and being a drawer. I mean, obviously with your dad as an artist and then this long line of artists before him. When you were making that shift from high school to college, what were you thinking about? What was in your head?
That was a weird time because I did not have a plan, and all my friends did, and I graduated from high school without any kind of a plan. And although what I wanted was to come back here and to go to the Memphis College of Art, so
P.S. I love how, like, as I asked you that question, you immediately went back in time and had that, like, look that all seniors have when like the grown-up comes in the room and they're like, Elizabeth, you're about to graduate, what are you gonna do with your life? You were just like, yeah, I didn't.
yeah. There's this author, this Irish author, and I can't, I'm so bad with remembering names, I can't remember her name, but she had this great book of essays, and she talked about how people without children, myself included, like we are less far removed from our own childhood because we don't have that sort of buffer of having another, like experiencing another person's childhood. So yeah, when you asked me that, like it took me right back. That was not a fun time. But at some point, also in my high school, the guidance counselor just did not like me at all and just was not really very helpful with trying to get me into a college. I was what you might call a lackadaisical student, and actually one of my teachers called me that exactly. But I tested really well, so I had great ACT scores, and so I somehow I wrote to request a catalog from MCA. I wrote and mailed it in, and or I don't know, she might have gotten it for me, but probably not. And so then I read like the MCA catalog obsessively, and it just like everything about this like whoever, like their marketing people at the time who put this together did an excellent job, because it looked like what I wanted my life to be. Like it looked like where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And there was like a cat in the library, and I just like, this is just like a dream. And so then I set about on my own applying to go to MCA. And my mom and my stepdad were just like really supportive. My stepdad drove me up here so that I could do an interview. When I graduated from high school, they gave me a big one of those big zip up portfolios. And so I like carried that with me. And, they did all this stuff to help me, like not to help me figure out how to do it, but just like to help me do it. Like they, like driving me here. And then I got accepted and moved back here.
Now, had you had any experience at MCA? Had you done any of the Saturday schools or any of
No. No, I didn't. I don't know if I'd ever been to it before. I mean, of course I knew about it because Overton Park. But I don't know that I had ever been inside of it before that. I just knew what it was.
Okay.
And my brother lived about a mile away from it. So like I had a place that I could go and move into. And so my mom and my sister drove me up here like 2 weeks after I turned 18. And I started school like a week later.
Now, what was that like? Because, I mean, that was going from, I mean, it sounds like in Panama City you had a really good art infrastructure in high school. And so it wasn't like you were coming from, I don't know, some tiny little school that didn't have anything at all. But what was that experience like going from Florida, suddenly being back in Memphis, and then being here at Memphis College of Art? I'm curious, what was that like?
Well, it was really weird because I guess I thought that I would come here and just immediately be a different person. And I was pretty, I mean, I don't like to use the word shy, but that seems appropriate at this time. I was pretty shy and just didn't make friends really easily. So I thought that I would go into MCA and then suddenly have like all these, like, kind of the group that I had in high school that I admittedly took for granted. Thought I would have something like that there. And I mean, after a while I did, but it was a huge adjustment. I mean, because first of all, I just moved out on my own just all of a sudden. And my mom and her parents cobbled together the tuition, but everything, I was on my own for everything else. So I got a job at Domino's and also did work study at MCA. And so it was really hard to kind of balance all of that and also to like buy all the supplies. And so I always had like fewer supplies than I should have and not as good as I should have probably that first year. And so it was kind of a stressful year. But there was some good stuff in it too. There was a little group of Kirby people at MCA that year. And so that was kind of nice because I was reconnecting with a lot of people I had been friends with before I moved. And some of the classes I had were pretty amazing. Some of the drawing classes especially, I really thrived in. Other classes, like 3D design, I did not.
Now, tell me about the drawing classes. I'm super curious. Like, who were you working with, or who was there?
Well, I cannot remember this woman's name, and she was not there for very long. So it's not like a big name that we would recognize. I mean, and I only mean that like in terms of Memphis and MCA teachers. She just, whoever this woman was, she was not there for very long, but she was really great. Like she was I felt like she could see that I was like super homesick, and she was a little nurturing, which was nice. And but we did this really fun stuff where we would draw something like, say, with like Conti crayon and like chalky kind of things, and then we would move it all around. We would move all the like with erasers or with our hands or whatever, and then we would make new things out of it. And one of them, we then actually added paper and more paper and more paper, and things like that were just really, just anytime that I could draw really was what I wanted to do. But you couldn't major in drawing, so I was like, okay, I'll major in painting. But then painting required more supplies, and so it stressed me out. And I mean, I did some like not terrible paintings that first year. I had Fred Burton, And he was really funny and just very, just that super dry sense of humor. Um, and
So you came straight in your first year, you're taking painting.
yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
guess that's how it works at MCA.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And
So it was like, I started the day with like, I want to say like art history. And then I had an English class at some point. And then I had painting, drawing, 3D design, 2D design. And then my mind goes blank. And 3D design, 2D design, my first panic attack.
Now, tell me about, you were talking about Fred. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Fred is a storied individual. I mean, in
Yeah.
terms of like his mythology here in town, especially at MCA.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about, and then also like there's a part of my brain that says like, what would Elizabeth and Fred be like in the same room together? And so did that mesh for your temperament?
What would 18-year-old Elizabeth
Right.
and Fred be like in the same room? Did that mesh with my temperament? No. No, he was one of those, like, one of those guys who presented as gruff, where I just like wasn't buying it, sort of a thing. Like his bark was worse than his bite, kind of a thing. Like, I mean, I've heard people talk about him like yelling and getting, but I didn't really experience that. Because if I had, would totally remember that. That would be my main memory. But my main memories of him are like him playing Van Morrison and while we were working, and the sketchbook work we had to. I don't honestly. I don't know if I don't know if I still have my MCA sketchbooks. I don't know what would have happened to them, but I don't remember looking at them during that period when I was looking at early 90s sketchbooks. But I don't really have a whole lot of strong memories of that time.
Because I remember he is also a huge sketchbook encourager or an enabler. And then I also know that he's sort of like super well known for just the huge amount of stuff that he would present to the students. I mean, for me, thinking about that shift from high school to college,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, so much of it is like that it could be art. Like, not only could it be art, but a totally different sort of understanding of what I thought art was. Was that sort of the way it was for you, or had you? It sounds like you were exposed to a lot of really amazing things that were beyond what one might normally think of as a high school experience with art. What about like when you were making that transition to MCA? What kind of things were you seeing that were exciting for you?
Well, I think I was seeing a lot of people who were at the time, I thought, doing just a way better job than I was. I was like not really super confident because also I had, I was, a small fish in a big pond. I was going somewhere where, like, all this time I had been the person who draws everywhere and the kid who draws the stuff for the school newspaper and all that. And now I was like, everybody was like that. So I wasn't special. And it was just like, the way I talk about it is that I was not ready for that experience. I was not ready to be in college. I was not ready to buckle down. I mean, all I wanted to do was hang out with my friends and smoke cigarettes, really. And I did a lot of that year. And I basically learned a little bit and then decided I just wouldn't go back after the first year.
I mean, it also sounds like you were experiencing like all of the very difficult sort of grown-up parts of college, especially when you're having to deal with buying art supplies. I mean, in some ways, like, I think a lot of students have that experience, but I know a lot of students don't necessarily have that experience. And it sounds like that was like front and center in terms of thinking about that experience for you.
Yeah, because it was, because I mean, it just made everything harder. And then, when it was time to pay for the second semester, it was just like, just gathering up all the money from all the different people. And then at one point I tried to get a job. Well, I did get a job. I thought that I would start I'd be a hostess at Shoney's, and then I could kind of start being a server because people made more money doing that, and maybe the hours would be a little bit better. And so I went to my first night at Shoney's, and there was to be the hostess, and there was not a hostess there to train me. And they were like, "You're just going to have to be the hostess."
How did you do that?
It was, I just did it. I just ran back and forth to the kitchen and tried to figure out who could help. And then the next day I went in and turned my uniform back in because then I had to go home at like 10 o'clock and finish my homework for the next day. And, so like, I just couldn't, like, I couldn't even like try to get another job. Like just the work study and the working at Domino's was like all I could handle, and also do as much homework as was expected of us at that time.
So now you decide not to go back. Mm-hmm. And so how did you just sort of like start working? Or what was the transition?
The transition was, really, it wasn't a transition. I just kept working at Domino's the same amount of hours. Okay. But, and then actually I was really bored, for that summer. And then I got a second job at Kinko's, and I worked both jobs for a while, and then I quit Domino's, and then I just worked at Kinko's. Oh wait, hold on. What did I do? I got another job. I like totally forgot this, but I got like an office job, and I just went to work full time. And so it must have been 2 years that I didn't go to school. So I had an office job, and I was like customer service at a liquid chemical company on President's Island. And it was just excruciatingly boring. And then I was like, okay, I have to go back to school and do something else.
Now, when you were doing this job, I mean, I love this image of you. I mean, it's like something like straight out of a comic book, like you hanging out with your friends, just smoking cigarettes a lot. Mm-hmm. But now, what about during that 2 years when you were in the real world, air quotes, what were you making things during that time?
Yes. I was always still drawing and still making things. I mean, even when I first, like that first summer after MCA, I kept making things. Like I had some like incomplete paintings that I finished from school, and I always kept a sketchbook. And a lot of times my sketchbook was like plans for things that I wanted to make that I never actually made. So it was like a lot of little sketches, little plans for like a painting or a series of drawings or something. And then sometimes I would just like do an elaborate still life in pastels or something, or I would I worked a lot with it seems like I worked with pastels a lot during that time. I don't know, I guess I painted too. So maybe I would paint like a guitar, in acrylic, or just like real random stuff like that. But I was always still making things. Yeah, for sure.
And so, and I'm curious too, like thinking about you being back in Memphis, and you were making stuff. Were you going out? Were you seeing things that were happening around town, or were you going to museums?
Yeah. So at that time there was the the arts festival, and it was at Overton Park at that time. I remember going to that, and I didn't really start going to openings until I went to U of M, and they were like, you have to go to openings. And then I started going to openings. But yeah, I would have gone to, to the Brooks and the Dixon, and what else was around at that time? And it's funny though, because I still have a lot of memories of like going to those places with my grandmother, who didn't even live here, but she was here a lot. And then, so we would just always do that kind of thing together. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember what else. I would have done at the time. So I would have gone to see a lot of live music during that time too, because my boyfriend at that time, who's my longtime husband now, was in a band. So we were always going to live shows or going to his live shows.
And then what kind of music?
Just rock and roll music.
Okay. And so you decide you're done with this. I love how you worked at dry cleaners and at President's Island. Like, were you also handling radiation in your spare time? It's two of the most dangerous things possible. Okay, so you decide to go back to school.
Yes.
And so when you decide to go back to school, are you still thinking art?
Oh yeah. But I was like, oh, I'll be practical and I will major in. I can't remember if I thought I would major in art history. I don't know why anybody thinks that's practical. But at some point I did major in art education. I just I went through I just went through a lot. And actually, back up, rewind. I went back to school part-time initially. So I went to school for a year full-time, and then I was out of school for a year. Maybe it was only a year, and maybe then I went back to school part-time at night because I had a day job. And I had to start filling in some of the general education stuff. But after maybe a year of that, of taking an English and a history, I started being able to incorporate some art history, when it was offered at night. And because I was still thinking art. And I think that when I was back part-time, that's when I was thinking art history. But then after 2 years of part-time, I went back full-time, and I was like, oh, art education, because that's practical. And so then I went through however long of being an art education, in air quotes, major. And I say in air quotes because when it got time to take the education classes, I just really wasn't all that interested. It just wasn't, because I wasn't making anything. And if I was making something, it would be just something a kid would make. And it just didn't satisfy the kind of need that I had to make my own stuff. And also there was a portion of the program where you had to, anybody who's majoring in education at U of M had to do junior achievement, where you got a little packet of materials and you had to go into a school and to a 5th grade class and teach junior achievement. And so I picked up my little packet and I was assigned to Sherwood Elementary because it was close to where I lived. And every time I drove anywhere near it, I would just have a mini panic attack. And then I was like, maybe education is not. And so I dropped that class. I was like, maybe education is not for me. So eventually I majored just in painting.
Now, talk to me a little bit about that moving from the real world to University of Memphis, or was it Memphis State at the time?
It was, I think that by the time that I started going full-time, it was University of Memphis.
Okay.
So it was great. It was really great. I had I had 2 years of part-time, and that was just going to take me forever. And so the summer before I really started full-time, I had to take 3D design again, because let me rewind and tell you about 3D design at MCA. It was taught by Peter Sanjan, and I was just so not into it. I mean, bless his heart. He had a lot to deal with, and then he had me to deal with, because I just was not into it at all. And so one time, I think he had us design some games or something, and somebody designed one that just really grabbed my attention. And I was like, oh, look, if you do this, you can do that. And I was in there moving things around. I was like, oh, this is so cool, blah, blah. And Peter Sanjan said to that student, well, so-and-so, you have done something that I have not been able to do all semester. You got Elizabeth interested.
Oh, no.
Ouch. I ended up making a couple of really good things for that class, but I did not do well in that class. So I had to retake it, which was totally fine, because it was Niles Wallace, and so that was my first introduction to Niles Wallace. And it was really just I don't know if I just, it had been 5 years. It was slightly more mature, and I was ready. And I was also paying for it myself, and it was easier to do because I had loans. So I definitely took it. I just took it way more seriously. And it was easier to take it more seriously when I didn't have quite the financial worries that I did in year one.
Right.
And also just like at home, I was like way more established. Like that first year, it was like my first year of freedom. So, like away from my parents and just like going wild, but not really wild. I mean, like Elizabeth Alley wild, not like anybody else wild. And so then by the time I went back, Toby and I had been living together for several years. We were just, he probably had like just a full-time job at that time. And we just had kind of just a regular kind of, home life.
Right.
So that just made it all way easier for me. So took that class. I had to take some other classes over again, which was fine because I ended up bringing my what is it, your grade point average, ended up bringing that, like by the time I was done, because I was in school for 4 more years, I was like cum laude. So like I did not mind taking classes over and building up that GPA again.
Now, what do you remember about Niles as a teacher early on?
At first, he gave a little bit of like Fred Burton vibes because he's kind of like quiet and, a little serious, but then you can kind of see, his sense of humor in there. And I mean, this was a long time ago, so I don't really remember what we did in the class. I just remember not hating it, and probably after 2 years of working, full time at a liquid chemical company, I was like, just give me anything, and so it was kind of great. I don't remember anything that I made in there, but I do remember that I did make stuff and I did the work and made a decent grade.
It's funny, when I interviewed Mary Kay Benke, said she would say that and then she'd be like, I got an A in that class. And it would just be like, no matter what class it was, it would just be like, I got an A in that class. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're there and you're taking these classes. Mm-hmm. You got Niles. Who else was there when you were taking those classes?
Just all the best people. Greeley was there.
Now, what do you remember about Greeley as a teacher? Because that was probably, you said that was early 90s?
Yeah.
So that was sort of early in Greeley's time as a teacher?
Yeah, it would have been like, by the time I was going back full time, it was 94.
Okay.
So Greeley was, he was great. He just, he said a lot of things like the back looks better than the front. And that arm looks like a broomstick, but that's okay because I like broomsticks, kind of in that Peter Sanjan kind of way. But that, again, I guess because I was older and more into it, I found those things really funny rather than, like he was just, and he was great. Like I remember, maybe it was like Sculpture 1, and I don't remember at what point I would have taken that. I didn't do great in Sculpture 1, but I loved his presentations because the very first one he did, it was so many people that I had just never heard of and never seen. And it was like, I just learned so much as far as like who else to look at, what other artists have done or are currently doing. And he was the one that said we had to go, well, maybe it was Dick Knowles. But he also was like, you have to go to art openings. And so just learned a lot from him. And also he was just so like, he was just really easy to get along with. And so I feel like I took maybe some other kind of class from him. Like maybe he did like a drawing and composition type class. Yes, he did. And also he did the final class where you do your final project. That was Greeley's class.
And for me, one of the things I remember about Greeley's early class, or I think Greeley's class might have been the first one where people like showed us slides.
Yeah.
Like I feel like in drawing, it was all like books. They, like Steve Langdon would bring in a book or Dick Knowles would bring in a book, but I don't remember either of them really showing us any slides. But I remember being in Greeley's class, like that was the first time I remember that was the first time I really remember seeing things.
Yeah.
And I remember him being such a good storyteller. Like I remember he showed like the like stuff that Greeley liked at the time, like that's sort of minimalist, like Donald Judd and David Smith and things like that. And I remember just being like totally bored with that. But then when he showed us that Richard Serra and he told us that crazy story about how like he put it up and then people got really mad and then they tore it down and they took it to a junkyard, like that kind of stuff. Like I remember his storytelling was such an intricate part, or such a that was like the thing that hooked me, I think.
Yeah. He was great. I mean, just a great storyteller. And I'm remembering, like, as I'm talking about this, that drawing and composition class was, I think that was at the time of the thing that I talked about earlier with the MCA versus U of M. And we had a show. Our class was going to be a part of a show in conjunction with something going on at the art museum. It might have been Leslie Dill, but I can't totally remember. But we did group projects, and this was like the first time in my life that a group project like was good for me. And I worked with a guy named Stevens. I can't remember who I worked with. A guy named Stevens something, and then I think there was this older woman who came to Memphis because like her husband moved to Memphis. And so she went to U of M and she was there for a couple of years and she was really amazing. But I remember like there were so many like just cultural differences being in the South. Like one time she was like, so one of my teachers said we had to draw this in ink pen. Is that like a certain kind of pen? I was like, no, it's just a pen, but she's saying ink pen. So to differentiate from a pen, she's saying ink pen. Like I had to kind of explain. We kind of had to explain like the Southern accent to her. But we did this really cool project where I think we all went downtown and we like took pictures and then we had to like make some kind of a project out of that. And so Steve and this woman and I made this big like floor to ceiling reproduction somehow. I don't really remember how we did that, of a picture of the cobblestones. And then there were other things that went with it. And at the time, Greeley brought in, so this whole thing had something to do with cotton. So he brings in these little, like these plants and stuff. And I kind of feel like that was the first time he like put a root like in the wall, like coming out of the wall horizontally. I kind of feel like that was a thing for him too at that show. And he made like a grid of them. And it was called Roots, Routes, and Ruts.
Now, you were talking about Greeley, and then you said you also had classes with Dick Knowles. And so I'm curious what your experiences with Dick were like.
He was amazing.
It's so funny. Like for me, one of the things I love about this project is that I'll ask these questions, and then what the people will say will just be totally not what I expected. And so, like when you were like, he was just amazing. Like it really. I mean, did you go to his funeral?
Yeah.
Okay. Like for me, like the perfect way of thinking about Dick was just like his funeral or his memorial service, where like people got up and were like, God, he was such a great teacher, and then someone else would get up and say like, he said I wasn't going to be anything but a Germantown housewife. And I'll be damned if I made sure that I didn't
know exactly
do that.
who you're talking about.
And so it's like one of those things where, so when I said that and you said that, I was like, okay, all right, okay. So anyway, so Dick was great.
Yeah. Did you go to Steve Langdon's?
No.
Oh my God, that was amazing. So yeah, I thought he was great. He loved me, so that helped.
Now, what do you think it was? I mean, because you were talking earlier about personalities in the classroom and sort of clicking or not clicking. What do you think it was about Dick that clicked for you?
I think I just so when I think that I had his class, his figure drawing class, maybe that first semester that I went back full time. And because I was like, 26 23 at the time, I just had a lot more confidence in what I was doing. And I think that he appreciated that. So, you know, we get in there and we draw the figure, and I just like start, you know, drawing, because at this time I could draw big, you know, and I just would, you know, draw. And it's not that they were great. It was just that I like wanted to be in there. I wanted to be doing it. Like, I think he could tell that I was into it.
I mean, yeah, that sounds right. And do you remember things about his teaching style or his way of interacting with the students?
Yeah, because you could, like, he did not like everybody. And there was this one guy who actually I had been to MCA with also, and they argued openly in class, and he obviously did not like that guy. But some of the people like me, who was, you know, very, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but there were some people it seemed like he was less interested in helping, I think is what I'm trying to say. So he, and you could kind of see that. He didn't, I don't think he cared that you could see it, you know, like, I don't think he made a secret of it. If you weren't, you know, if you weren't in there to give it your all, then he just wasn't super interested, which was probably the issue with like all the teachers I had had prior to that. They could tell that I wasn't super interested, but now I was super interested. So, I mean, I feel like he helped me out a lot, and yeah, he was great. And then later I had him for painting also. And, I think I heard you say that he just was like, okay, paint something. And that had been my experience already, like at MCA there. I mean, Fred definitely didn't say anything other than paint this, you know, 5x5 canvas or whatever.
Right.
So I don't really remember like what I painted then. I have more like really strong memories of painting with Steve Langdon, because he just had like a huge influence on me, and what I painted and how I painted it. And
Man, talk to me about Steve, because I mean, my experience with Steve, I mean, it's one of my great regrets. Like, I had him when I was a total idiot. I think I only had him for one class. I never realized how great he was.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about, you know, what was it that you were taking the class with Steve?
I think that it was, I mean, it was probably like painting 2.
Okay.
So, and I don't think I took anything with him other than painting classes. So it was like maybe 2 or 3 painting classes, but he was kind of also always there, like in that, you know, that the old painting, like hallway, you know, it's like above the music area. And he was just kind of always there. So even if it was like you know, if I was with another teacher, he was kind of hanging out, you know? And so he would just like sit with me, and like maybe we'd look at a book of some paintings, and he would be like, see how, because he was like trying to tell me like if you're like, okay, let's say you're painting, I don't know, like something repetitive, like a fence. He's like, don't paint them all the same. He's like, see here in this, where he's like, he's doing this like doot doot doot, and then he would do that, and this is like doot doot, and this is like, and he would like make the little motions with his hand, and just like I felt like he just took that kind of time with me to help me think about not trying to make perfect things, and not taking the easy way out of something, not, or, you know, and just like being weird. He was like, I remember one time he was like, Elizabeth, why don't you paint something weird? And I was like, I'm painting a street, like literally like the asphalt. I was like, is that not weird? But you know, but then I saw his work where it would be like, if it was a painting of an asphalt street, it would have like a scar, like a sewn up scar in the middle of it or something, something like that. And I still think about that as I paint normal things. Like, Elizabeth, can't you make something weird? And then one time, I was working on a painting and it was going really well, but I was kind of struggling at one part of it. And he was trying to get me to literally make a mark with the paintbrush and just leave that and go on to the next thing. And that was so hard for me because I wanted to like tidy it up, right? So he stood behind me and yelled at me until I did it. But it was great. I needed it. He was like, "Stop, no, don't do it," and he was just great. And also he was just funny, and his stories were just hilarious and weird. And also they used to do that thing where you would, people would get together and go on a trip. So I did that with him. It was a big group and we went to Washington, D.C. and, so it was, Steve Langdon and his wife, Daryl, and, his stepdaughter, whose name has escaped me, but she was on it too. And then all these other people, I can't remember who else was on it, except for Toby went with me. But we all went to DC and we just had the best time. And imagine being on an airplane with Steve Langdon in, 1996. And we went to an Ethiopian restaurant. I had Ethiopian food for the first time. And we went to, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of that museum, but William Christenberry had a show at this museum, and the Phillips Collection. And the museum was closed, but like we got to go, and then William Christenberry was like there talking to us about his show. And so it's like I have like those kind of memories with Steve Langdon.
Now, you were talking about his funeral. What was it that made a funeral so great?
Well, there were, first of all, it was very unusual because I had pretty much only been to Catholic funerals my whole life, which, I don't know if you're familiar with Catholic funerals, but you go to a wake.
It's basically a mass, right?
Well, there's it's a 2-day thing, because first you go to the wake, and then you do have normal, standing around talking to people, but then you have to do the rosary, and then it just takes forever. And then there's the funeral, and it's whole mass. So this was just at Memphis Funeral Home, and somebody said some nice things about Steve, and then people would get up and talk. And I think that was the first time I'd ever been to that kind of funeral. So there's that, that was definitely different and just so interesting. And also at one point, there were these three Black women dressed all in white, and they just walked up and just started singing a gospel song. And it was beautiful. And it was so something that would happen at Steve Langdon's memorial. And it was just interesting. When I think about it now, even it's there was no what do you?
Yeah, like a brochure or a program.
They just got up and sang when it was time.
And there wasn't somebody that said, and now these people are going to come up and sing.
No, and maybe there was a program, but it's it all felt very spontaneous. It was lovely.
Wow. Yeah, no, I for some reason I either wasn't aware or didn't think about it. And so you were talking about working with Steve and Greeley and Dick. Now I'm curious, at what point does art history or the contemporary art, at what point does that sort of begin to creep in? At what point does that become a thing of interest for you?
Well, art history had always been of interest to me. And I, all kinds. One of the night classes that I was able to take in art history was early Christian and Byzantine art. And Toby was still in school then and needed some kind of a humanities credit, and so he started the class with me, and then it was slides, and I was just eating it up, and he was and I made an A in that class. So just looking at just looking at art is just I loved every art history class that I took. It was just fantastic. Katie Siegel was there at the time, so she was a big contemporary. I took modern contemporary art with her, and I mean, she was so great, just fascinating, and learned so much about newer stuff, contemporary things with her. Um, so honestly, I probably could have taken like one more art history class and had a minor in it, but I was so done by the time I was done. I was like, I'm just gonna.
Now, you were talking about Katie Siegel. I mean, I totally missed out on her. I'm curious, what do you remember about her classes? And her as a teacher? I mean, she's such a fantastic writer.
She was just so enthusiastic and just so like excited to tell us about all of this stuff. And it didn't feel like, it felt like she was just excited. Like we were just there because she was talking about this cool stuff. Like it didn't drag. It was just like fun. It was just a fun class. She was a fun teacher. She was a great storyteller. She was the first. So I heard about, so there's a book called Naked by the Window about Anna Mendieta.
Okay.
And who was her husband?
Carl Andre.
Carl Andre Boo.
P.S. I'm also contractually obligated to mention that Anna Mendieta is a graduate of the University of Iowa.
Okay, yes, of course. And when she told the story, it sounded like, I mean, it's obviously a very tragic story, but she made it sound like all gossipy and like, oh, and there's this guy and there's this and there's that. I mean, like, that's kind of how she taught, was like, oh, wait till you hear about this dude, And then later, like I always thought about, that book, and I read it like within the last, 8 years or so. Such a great book. Okay. So good. But it was like, she was always talking like that, like talking about like, the reason that everybody knows who Picasso is and nobody knows who Braque is because Picasso was Spanish and was just better at because it was like brought up to be more like just louder, just more boisterous, more self-promoting, more, And so that's the way she talked about things. But it's also like I learned a whole lot. She also, she was the one who pointed out to me, and I've repeated this a lot over the years because I think it's really funny, that if you, that like University of Memphis painting students, you could always like tell the difference because we painted all the way to the corner, whereas MCA students just like didn't really bother with it.
That's so interesting.
That was just like it was just a funny little thing. But so I had her on my final like committee. Katie, Steve, and I guess Greeley were on my final like committee. Yeah.
Now, thinking about that, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff to cover in there. P.S. We're almost done.
Oh my gosh.
But there's a lot of stuff to cover. Or were there other things, like before we think about your senior thesis, were there other things that were particularly important about your time at the university?
Well, I can't not mention Bonnie Beaver because she was amazing. And I took several classes in independent studies from her. And
now,
yeah.
What about Bonnie Beaver was so great? P.S. I feel like we could totally just have like a whole podcast series on how great Bonnie Beaver is.
Right. Yes, we absolutely could. She just always had us doing something. Like it was just constant making, moving. And now like I understand how movement like fuels creativity. And she never talked about that and maybe only just had an innate understanding about it. But we were always doing things in there. We were always drawing, making things, and just like it was just interesting. Like the projects that she had us do, it reminded me of the drawing projects that I was talking about at that one MCA class, where it really just fueled something in me or just satisfied a need. And I did some just really great work in there that I enjoyed making. And then I was like, oh, and it's also pretty good too. So.
Yeah, I love that thing that you were saying about the movement and about constantly being in motion. I mean, for sure, like when I think about those classes with Bonnie Beaver, because I'm just like you, I took as many things as I could take from her. And she was also one of those people that, like, for me, it wasn't so much about her as a artist persona. You know, like when you were taking a class with Greeley or Dick or Larry, like their artness was, or their artist was in the room, you know? But with Bonnie, it was totally just like, oh my God, okay, so here's this thing, and then, oh, you could totally do this, and you could totally do that. And there was this kind of like constant movement. But I also remember for me that she was always like sort of moving around the room, grabbing a thing, pulling a thing over here, whether it was a supply or a different technique, or it was a different way of seeing things or looking at things.
Yeah.
It was just like, and when you were talking about making things that were really good in that class, I think everything I made in that class was horrible. But in the way that you were talking about the sketchbook before, like how it's going to be for something else, or it's going to eventually become a bigger thing. Like for me, that's what Bonnie's classes were. It really was just like, yeah, let's try this, and then maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
Yeah.
I mean, she's such a great dervish that way.
Yeah, we did a lot of experiments that I think in the class I made into other things, because we in one of the classes we had nude models a lot, and then we would work in whatever kind of technique we were just trying, with the nude model, and I just ended up with some really some more interesting stuff that I guess was just like, it was more intuitive, I guess, and I did not work like in an intuitive way in painting classes and oil painting. And and I think that, like, I've learned that is the way that I prefer to work. It's a more intuitive kind of a process, but it took me a long time. If I had just kind of stuck with what I was doing in Bonnie's class, then it would have maybe come out differently. I also want to point out that I was in this weird time between Larry Edwards and Beth Edwards. So I did not have either of them as a teacher.
That is a strange time.
Yeah.
Was there someone there there was someone there that didn't work out, I think. I remember Beth saying that. They had hired somebody and it just didn't work out.
I think that was right before. I think that was also like right after I graduated.
Okay.
Because maybe either Steve or Dick retired. Like, right, like they were like, okay, let's wait for Elizabeth to graduate and then we'll retire.
Now, when you were talking about, and then also one of the things I remember about Bonnie Beaver, and I don't know how this could possibly be true, but when I think about Bonnie's classes, for some reason I think the tables were lower than they were supposed to be. Like, I always sort of envision this place as kind of like an overhead view, and I think it was the only time that we worked on tables. Like every other time it would be like those horrible horses, or there would be like an easel in the room. But like with Bonnie's classes, for some reason I remember it just being these tables that were all around the room, and then in the center of the room it was like she had this like island, and she would just sort of move around the room and look at things sort of upside down, and we would all just be working like mad.
So that's exactly how I remember it. And she had these boxes. We all had boards that we would work on, and she had boxes that we would put on the table so that we could prop the boards up.
Right.
And yeah, that's what I remember. And we always had music going, and it was just like, it was just a really great class. Like all the people in it were really just, it was just, because at that point too, once you're taking that class, you're kind of committed to doing the thing. So it's like everybody in there was committed to it, and everybody liked her, and
what was the class? Was it drawing and composition? Drawing and painting? I don't remember either.
It was drawing and painting.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it was called.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because, basically it was just kind of like the only parameter was that it was water media, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then also I remember one of the things about her class, and I talk about this all the time with my students, is the reducing glass. And how, like, instead of it being a magnifying glass, Bonnie had this, like, box of reducing glasses so that you could be in that tight little room and you'd be standing over your piece, but then you could look at it through this
I don't
reducing
remember
glass.
that.
And it was an opposite. It would make basically an iPhone thumbnail,
Yeah.
and it would just give you this like little teeny tiny thing, and then you would be able to be like, oh yes, of course, I need to increase the darks and lights, or I need to deal with this corner. I remember she had so many just like great things. Like it was like that, and then also the spray bottles and the salt and the laying the plastic down. It was kind of like all of the little, not tricks, but it was kind of like all of these like techniques that you would never think to do unless you had Bonnie Beaver there sort of telling you about it.
Yeah. And then I took a lot of those and made a class at Flicker Street Studio called Mixed Water Media, I think. And it just like, it was just like tribute to Bonnie Beaver, basically.
Because and then another thing that I think was really great about Bonnie Beaver was that she would totally, I love how she has like a Native American name. Like we just would only say her first and last names. So, but one of the things I remember about her classes too was just this sense of freedom. And I don't know if it was, do you think was it because the other teachers were more rigid, or do you think it was just that Bonnie Beaver was just kind of like this like breath of fresh air where she was just like, well, let's try this, let's do that?
Yeah, I think it was more about taking risks, whereas like in the painting classes it was make a painting, make a still life of this, or but this was just kind of like, let's see what happens. It was more of a let's see what happens vibe, which I like.
Yeah, like I remember when those classes were over, like it would just be like a chore to stuff all of the things into the portfolio because the class was there was so much production, there was so much making. Yeah. Oh, yeah, she's so good. I totally remember that class. So let's see. We're doing good. We got good time.
Okay.
Talk to me about your senior thesis project.
It was a series of paintings about my family, and so I was working on the figure, and these were all figuratives, but I cropped things down to a lot of times where like you couldn't see a face, so that it would be kind of a more general so I would think of it as a more like a general representation of like couples in the 50s, or because it's like my grandparents, old picture of them, or like somebody with a baby, even though they were really personal to me, so that I could so I cropped them down so I could kind of like stretch it to where I'm not just like making stuff just for me, I guess. So I made about 8 oil paintings on canvas, and we had our show, and it was a big class too, and we had our show at Martial Arts, and that whole class was really great. I kept like a separate sketchbook just for that class that I really liked. Like I kind of approached it in a different way than I do normally in the sketchbook, because it was just like this one project. So that was really fun, because then, that like ever since then, I've pretty much only worked like I work in a series, and I don't know, maybe that kind of started that. Yeah, it was a great class.
Well, if I remember right, the paintings were really meaty and sort of thickly, juicily painted. Do I remember this right? And then I also remember they were mostly a square format. You were cropping things down.
Yeah, there were a lot of squares and like smallish rectangles.
And you were working directly from photographs and they were personal, like you said. They were these personal photographs. How did you, like, what do you think, Because I mean, one of the things that's really tricky about those senior thesis exhibitions is really it's kind of like the first time that people are totally in charge, or as in charge as they can be, and be in school. And so, like when you were thinking about that, sitting down, focusing, we're going to do this thing. It's going to be a series or a project. I'm curious, what were some things that you were interested in, or some things that you wanted to make sure that were in that project?
Let's see. I kind of got distracted because I'd actually had two other shows.
Oh, talk to me about the shows.
So one was at Bookstar. Do you remember Bookstar?
Yeah.
I worked there, and David Phillips worked there when I did. And we did this just goofy little thing where we put up like boards, and then we hung our work like on these boards like right at the entrance. And I think that was maybe it was my first show. I don't remember. But and then also I had a show at that little coffee shop right near U of M that I can't remember the name of it. But
Clay worked there.
yes, Clay worked there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was before I knew Clay.
Coffee cellar?
Yes, and I had a show there, but I didn't tell anybody. And then, but somebody was like, "Oh, you have a show at the Coffee Cellar," and Greeley was like, "Why didn't you say anything?" And I said, "I didn't know if I was supposed to. Like, I didn't know if I was like if it was allowed to like have a show before." So silly. And then I think the whole class went there, which was really fun. So, I mean, those were, and I don't even remember like how that came about, but it was the thing I did. Like while I was still in school, I had a whole show. There.
All right, let's come back to that later.
Okay.
Okay, that was the alarm. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay.
And that was the first of two interviews that I recorded with Elizabeth Alley. The interview that you just listened to was recorded on June 21st, 2025. Please join us next week when we'll have part 2 of our series with Elizabeth. Thanks for listening.